Welcome everybody to our Compliance as Code webinar. This is a really exciting area for the industry, and quite frankly, lots and lots of new things are coming out. Although the people are very confused about the space, so we thought, let's just put a very strong webinar together with our thought leadership behind it. So its portion of it is going to be technical, but the other portion is going to be very business-like. Business specific, so I think it's going to cover most audience here. Okay, so it is under security and compliance domain, of course, and we're talking about how we can build a system of intelligence where it can check our cloud services and be able to not only secure them, but also keep it compliant for all of the compliance regulations that are out there. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well. So my name is Kamran Mehbood. I'm the Director of Product Management, Security and Compliance here at Cloudnosis, and my focus area is to really talk to our customers every day and really help them with their challenges on the cloud journey specific to security and compliance, more on the compliance side. On the regulations. And over the course, goodness, we have learned quite a bit from our customers, and also there's a lot of myth out there as well when it comes to compliance and data collection and evidence collection for the cloud as to what the auditors are looking for and how you can keep the services compliant to the regulations. Okay, so what we will learn today. Okay, so overview of the cloud and security compliance challenges. I think it's important to discuss what challenges you're going to see in your organization to actually start building out this expertise of security as code, compliance as code, and why this. We're also going to talk about why this area is actually becoming so important. And what are the drivers, business drivers and technical drivers that make this a very compelling area of growth in our industry. And also how to develop these specific compliance as code, security as code functions. What are they? What do they look like? And we are going to take two very good examples. We're going to take a VPC cloud, which practically every cloud vendor has in their environment. Although the session today is very AWS cloud specific, just because quite a few organizations are getting fairly mature in this area, and this space has been developed directly from the advent of the AWS cloud. But of course, the other cloud vendors are pretty much the same when it comes to compliance as code, and we're going to talk about that as well. Now, one important area that we're going to learn today is evidence collection and consolidation. So once you have written these compliance as code functions, they generate a lot of data. They generate a lot of machine data. And it's important to consolidate all that data and then how this data is presented to the auditors, to the business folks, and to the security folks, so that it makes sense. So we're going to talk about specific strategies on that. We're going to show an architecture diagram on what this evidence collection is all about. So again, very very interesting areas. Okay, and the very last at the end of the session, we're going to spend about really 4 minutes, 3 to 4 minutes on Cloudnosis security and compliance solution. So we're a company focusing heavily in this area for the cloud, for the public clouds, and we have built a platform that can actually run these signatures in real time and collect all the machine data and analyze it and then generate the risk ratings and of course all the compliance specific reports and audit data. So that's what that platform is all about, and we can discuss that at the tail end. And then after that, we can have a QA session. Just a quick housekeeping, we are recording this session, and you guys will get a copy of this session via email. It takes about a day from our marketing folks to get that out to you. And also, if you have any questions along the way, you can type in our chat channel and I'll go ahead and try to address that for you. Okay, so um, you know, we actually did a survey and asked companies, so tell us, why this area is becoming challenging for you, and what are, some of the inhibitors. And it's important to know that, because once you know those things, you can attack them, and you can have a risk mitigation plan for that. So so these are the 10 top items that we came up with, and let's just go over it real quick. We're not going to go into details in each, but just real quick. So first of all, they said there's not enough security and compliance guys in any company, and that's just true. I mean, we have gone to large organizations, multi-billion-dollar complex organizations, and they just don't have enough folks that can keep track and make sure that everybody stays compliant. And we know this because everybody are getting fined here and there, or certainly getting cited by the auditors. And manual compliance checklists and IT audits is not helping DevSecOps teams scale. So this area has to be reinvented. And of course, that's what the talk track is all about, and we're going to show you how to reinvent that area. Can't keep up with automated deployments without security automation. Again, this is an area of security as code, compliance as code, and we're going to discuss those SSDLC flows and where you want to insert checks. So we're going to have diagrams showing you those in fair clarity, so you can take action. And overall, the fact that a cloud is so agile, it's fairly overwhelming for security and compliance folks to keep track of all the changes that are happening in near real time. And of course, the manual processes in the middle, it's only slowing things down and not really keeping up with the security mandates and best practices. Uh, Tracking configurations manually is not possible anymore. That's a huge area for the cloud, because cloud is really just configurations at the end of the day. Because simple things like leaving something open, you can expose it to the entire world. It's not where you have your local network and some system was left open and it's only accessible to your employees. No, it's accessible to everybody, and it's all configuration driven. And agility certainly dictates that placing control in the hands of developers, which probably scares a lot of security folks and compliance folks. But it's really has to come down to that at some point. But you can have a very strong process, and we'll show you that through compliance as code that you can achieve this. You can't use old security tools. Old security tools are more about in-traffic analysis, which means just looking at the traffic flow from your firewalls all the way into your databases. But everything outside of that is all the configurations and all the infrastructure settings, which are not part of the flow, and that needs to be controlled and organized. And we'll show you that. And then there's some collaboration between security and DevOps. That's just a continuous challenge that we see. And really, at the end of the day, you need a total transformation to achieve escape velocity. And security is an afterthought, which in some companies we have seen that, although more and more security is becoming the leader in terms of getting a project off the ground. Okay, so security as Word doc or code. This is something that you have to come to terms with in your company quickly, and you need to gravitate towards the right side, which is code. So the old way is that, hey, we're going to build our security configuration procedures, security operation procedures, and we're going to have these SOPs available, and people can just go to a either a file folder or a hard copy binder and look at page 250 to see how this thing is set. That's the old way. That's because it was mandated by the regulators to have everything documented. You still need things documented, of course. That's part of the ISO 27000 process, and also regulators will ask you for the written documents as well. but it's really not meant for. So these documents, operating procedures, are really not meant for day-to-day use. From an agile DevSecOps perspective, because it's just not possible. With the speed of development, it's just at internet speed. And there's no way you're going to open a document to see, okay, which configuration settings I should have for my infrastructure. The new way, okay, which is the new paradigm shift we're seeing in the market, because of the agility and speed and transformation, that the security and compliance has to be identified and written as actual physical code that you can execute. And you can execute this code every hour or every minute, or whenever there's a change, in terms of somebody put a code up at Git or they're loading it into AWS. You can kick off these scans in near real time and make sure that everybody is within the guardrails. They are following the procedures that were written. That is the new way. So again, new and old, they both need to exist, but they need to coexist. And really, the new way is really need to take off for the cloud side. And I'm sure many of you are probably writing some of these, but you're not really realizing that that's what you're doing. A good example is um, the AWS CloudFormation templates. That's a very first level of infrastructure as code description of what our infrastructure should look like exactly with all the configuration settings. But that's a starting point. That is not the end game, and I'll show you why in detail. Okay, so automation, and around automation is the very first thing is that people ask, okay, how can we implement compliance as code? I think there's really three core areas around that, three pillars. What we see, first of all, is automation is what it's all about. You have to write the automation. The next question comes in is that, okay, well, where do we get these sample automation scripts and so on, and how do we get that started? That's the next bullet that you see, which is the AWS Labs on GitHub. So you can actually go to GitHub and pull those hundreds of code examples from the AWS Labs. That's directly from AWS, and they have all kinds of examples on things like enabling MFA to make sure the log is turned on and so on. And then once you have those two things in place, the third piece is, after you execute these codes, you have to collect and report on all this data, everything from your snapshots, and then you have to grade all the information with risk rating so that you can prioritize where to focus, and then be ready to present this information also to your auditors. I am rushing through these areas just because we're going to have a deeper slides in each of those areas, so don't worry if you're not catching it. And the automation example, as I said here, is these are API scripts that's checking everything from configurations to your S3 buckets, basically everything, all the services that you're running within the AWS cloud. Okay, so security as code with AWS. So what are the benefits, and what is the net return? Okay, um, if you create this process, so first of all, it's always on, which means it's running 24/7, and there aren't a whole lot of humans involved in a process. It's all code running at its own time and triggered. And the benefits is that obviously everything is automated, it's repeatable, you can audit it, and it's easy to iterate to improve on. And the sample forms of these codes I mentioned earlier was the most simplest forms are CloudFormation templates, but they can be anything from Python to Ruby codes to JavaScripts and things like that. And of course, everything is custom APIs, or you're getting snippet of code from GitHub from the AWS lab, or other areas. It doesn't have to be AWS. And then these are all snapshot data, because you have to constantly take snapshots of information so that you can build a history, so that you can show to the auditors that, look, not only we're compliant today, but we were compliant last week and week after that, and so on and so forth. Challenge number one in this area that we see is the culture has to change overall. People need to work together in cross-functional teams, so integrate, and you have to, uh, don't take the whole thing on all at once. First, try to walk or crawl, and deliver small, short sprints. Small improvements, and then kind of build on top of that. The small improvements could be, like I said, CloudFormation templates. It could be the AWS benchmarks, which we're going to talk about. The Center for Internet Security benchmarks. Those are a great set of 44 infrastructure as code or compliance as code examples that you can run and scan your infrastructure around that. Third one is obviously collaborate, communicate quickly and more effectively, and automate, build and deliver these functions as a service. So service that, folks can subscribe if they have a regulated workload that they're working with. Challenge number two is automation. So automation does require expertise. It absolutely requires two levels of expertise. One is that you need to know compliance rules, and equally you also need to know the AWS infrastructure itself and all the APIs associated with that. Once you have that, that's when you can make automation possible. And that should be your core governing principle around security and compliance. And I mentioned earlier that you can run AWS CIS benchmarks. You can actually pick that up for free off the internet just by typing AWS CIS benchmarks. And there's a link below that I have in the slide. But you can also get that from directly from AWS as well on their website. I've seen links, references there as well. So start with basic use of CloudFormation. Use a code repository and start building out your CI/CD process, continuous integration, continuous development processes. And as I said, you need to learn the API code development process. That's very, very critical in delivering success. Challenge number three is really, so once you have all that, is this is around data collection. This is around visibility. So all these things are running, and it's providing all these signals and telemetry, and you have to pull all that together. So, for example, CloudTrail should be enabled by default for all accounts. Okay, and you need to track configuration drifts. You can use config for that, but it's not enough. You will have to write some scripts outside of that to be able to track and manage and act on those changes, and then analyze your CloudTrail, your DNS logs, your VPCs, and of course turn on guard duty, and then track ports, ingress, peer-to-peer access from one account to another account. So all these areas, delivering you visibility, but it's also generating data to be fed into your compliance reporting process as well. So you need to build two set of expertise around this. So, pulling it all that together, and we have a pretty good slide that actually explains that in more detail. Okay, so I think from now you can see the missing link in the overall AWS security is really automation and continuous monitoring. So, and this is being recognized from those companies that are now mature using AWS, that it's really not humanly possible to scan all these thousands of configurations and the changes on an hourly basis, because depending on your infrastructure, how fast you're growing, or how fast you're migrating, you can have services go up and down. You can have VMs launch 1,000 per hour and then come down to zero. So log file is a starting point, but quite frankly, in a new world, log files are just not effective. or they're just not enough. They're important to keep track of and to store and manage, uh, but you need to look at the configuration changes and have these compliance as code automations built in place to be able to find these changes. And some of these examples are noted below, like ensure no security group allows ingress from 000 to port 22. So again, how are you going to know that unless you're running a script that actually checks for that and alerts you that whether it's failing or whether it's passing. And that's, by the way, part of your CIS controls, which I just talked about. And I have a detailed slide on that as well. Okay, so speed of evidence collection from a compliance as code perspective. Here's the net value for this. I mean, you can get your audit done literally in few days. Okay, so let's take a look at the typical PCI process review from a traditional process standpoint. Basically, accessor will request hundreds of pieces of evidence from you. And they'll come on site and they'll request more evidence, and they'll certainly look over your shoulders. They'll take screenshots. For those of you who have gone through that process, you know what I'm talking about. And then also take a look at the scan results as well. And this process varies. Sometimes a week on site, sometimes it could be 6 weeks or 2 months on site, and then lots of emails and phone calls go in the middle. Now, cloud-enabled process on your right, what you see, it's really cool and interesting, because if you automate everything, then the data is generated in near real time throughout the year. Okay, so all that data is being collected throughout the year in near real time, and it gives the auditor access to all this data. For example, you can bring up all the scan results for 60 days ago, and you'll know exactly what the configuration of your entire AWS footprint was at that day. Okay, so if you have all these things enabled and running, you should be able to pull that up and show it to your auditor, and that buys confidence. So when the auditor is ready to do all these audits, and they can just basically click on a folder and see everything come up automatically, and all the evidences are presented, and then also they're ranked, and all the risk ratings are identified. And if you can even map them to a regulation number, which is quite complex actually, but you can provide a lot of confidence to your regulators very, very quickly. And that whole process will take a day. It's just one day on site, and that's it. And maybe a few observations they might ask you, but it's very, very minimal. I mean, you could be done with a PCI review within a few days instead of 6 weeks. So lots of cost savings are here, and of course, avoiding any compliance risk, lack of compliance. Okay, so compliance as code evidence collection. And this is where things are heating up. So basically, there's a couple of slides after this that really drill down into exactly what compliance code is, what you need to do with it, and how you can put it all together to create a very secure cloud infrastructure environment, and also generate all the evidences that are needed to be able to present to the auditors. So we put this flow together because this is kind of what our product CloudGnosis does. Okay, at a high level, this is what it does. So let's talk about the easy thing. Well, what's easy? Easy is you can go to your infrastructure and turn on log file recordings, and config should be on, and CloudTrail, CloudWatch, VPC flow logs. So all this stuff you can just go and turn on. That's fairly easy to do. Okay, but it's also easy to have somebody turn it off as well. So that's another matter that you need to constantly check, that is it still on or not, and that's compliance as code checking, a script that you will need to write. What's easy also is have S3 logs, RDS logs, and Lambda functions logging. Okay, so that's also pretty easy. You can just go turn it on, but also someone can go in and turn that off as well. Okay. So you have to constantly check to make sure that they're still on. The third one is host-based logs. Okay, so the host-based log is within the EC2 instance within your compute, and those are server logs, audit log, and application logs. That's also fairly easy to do. Okay, you'll have a script when you kick off an application. It's just recording everything, and that's fairly easy to do. Um, the last one at the bottom, where it says machine metadata and related configuration changes, and limit reached. Okay, so that is, this area is pretty advanced, and it requires quite a bit of knowledge. And first of all, you need to know what you need to write the scripts for, what you need to check for, and then be able to store that information effectively, so that you can put it all together. So all this data that you see here, these four boxes on the right, all this data has to be consolidated and collected, and that's all of your evidence collection. Okay. Now, evidence collection is not enough that you have the log file turned on. You still have to explain to the auditor that, okay, but do you do the analysis on the log? And do you put a risk rating on the log? And do you have any pass-fail functions? How do you know that something is passing or failing from a compliance perspective? So all of that requires evidence analysis, and then of course the evidence is based on compliance reporting, and then you have to have risk rating associated with that, and even ideally put a pass and fail function tied to it. So this really requires a couple of experts sitting down, and from compliance, from quality, from security, and from AWS experts, and really sitting down and going over all these things, and then coming up with that risk rating and pass and fail and so on and so forth. But that's what needs to get done to have an effective compliance as code and evidence-based collection process. Okay, so you must be saying, you've been talking about this so long, you still haven't shown me an example of what is this compliance as code? What does it actually look like, and what does it do? Okay, I'm going to show you two examples. The very first example is Virtual Private Cloud, VPC. Okay, it's a function within AWS that's every single customer uses, and that's one of the big ones because that's where the traffic is going in to your basically cloud infrastructure, localized, and you need to analyze what's going on within there. So I'm going to walk you through this a little bit slowly because it's a pretty busy slide. So the first thing on your left-hand side, you see VPC auditing. How do we audit this? Well, you can turn on VPC flow logs, CloudTrail, CloudWatch, config, and Trusted Advisor. All these things are easy to turn on. Okay. Some of these will give you fairly good information pretty quickly. Like, for example, Trusted Advisor will give you some, not all. AWS config will give you some, and CloudWatch, CloudTrail will have some alerting turn on for you, which is pretty good. That's the minimum that you need to have, but it doesn't satisfy compliance regulations. So what you need to do is, okay, well, you got it turned on, but how do you know they're still on, and how do you know the configurations that are there are correct? Okay. Now that goes on the right side of the equation, which is custom rules written by you. That's where it says. So all these bullets that you see on the right, and I'll take for example the very first one, unused VPC internet gateways. Okay, that in itself is basically kind of a security risk, and you need to remove that. Because any rogue person can get in and take over one of these and start connecting to some of the pieces and start listening, within your infrastructure. Things like unrestricted network ACL inbound traffic. So your access control list. Okay, looking at that very carefully and constantly checking and monitoring to make sure that you have it restricted. It's not unrestricted. It's not open to everyone. Enabling flow logs for VPC subnet traffic. So like I said, all these AWS tools, you can turn things on, but first of all, you turn them on, but you still have to set the settings right. But even if the settings were correct, How do you know they're still correct today? What if somebody went in and changed it, right? So all these areas, just for VPC control, I have it listed, and it's probably, I would say, 30-40% rules, in addition to what we're showing you, a smaller set here, that you need to go and analyze this. And all this stuff is written in APIs. It's not something that you can just go look at very easily within the AWS console menus and functions and submenus. It's not even humanly possible, quite frankly. So you can run all these tests within I would say a second or two, and have your responses generated, and then you can grade those responses and so on. So again, requires uh, expertise in developing these things. But that's what compliance as code is all about for, let's say, VPC. Now, I'll give you another example. A more popular example is S3 buckets. So this is where you're storing your data. Okay, I mean, there's many areas you can store within AWS. Everything from, of course, not just S3, but also uh, you have RDSs and DynamoDB and different areas you can store things, but the principle is the same. So I'll take the S3 one because every single AWS client uses the S3 bucket. Simple storage, file server, and it's almost like a web server, quite frankly. So here you need to write all these functions that, hey, is S3 bucket authenticated read access? Is the default encryption turned on? Within the bucket, is the access log enabled? Do we have multi-factor authentication turned on when somebody goes in and deletes the bucket accidentally? Okay, is the versioning turned on? Is it publicly accessible? That's a big one. Okay, most of the hacks have happened because of this one, publicly accessible AWS. So, all these things, you need to basically go through and find out that, is it compliant or not? Because all this is part of your compliance and security process, and it needs to be graded. Things like looking at server-side encryption. Is the encryption strong ciphers, right? So again, these are some of the rules that I'm showing you for S3 bucket, but goodness, there's quite a few more rules for S3 that are out there, and so it's important to adhere, to these best practices. Okay, I think I've said enough on that, but those two examples, you guys get it, that this is what you need to do, where to write these codes, and that's what these functions are all about, and pull all that data. So once you have all that pulled in, you should be able to generate a report like this. So for example, this is a sample GDPR report, which showing you Article 25, which is a big one in GDPR, most of you know. You should be able to say, okay, for access control, encryption, or IAM audits, we found, let's say, 100 tests we ran, 29 um, failed, and 70 pass, and 71 pass, whatever that ratio is. You can kind of show all that, and then do a tally to say that it pass or fail, right? And that's the kind of level of reporting analytics that you need to achieve in your organization over time. It's not going to be overnight, but it's definitely going to be over time. Okay, so I think I'm going to start to wrap up things now, because I think I've really explained quite a bit on the value of compliance in the code, what they look like, what the benefits are. I'm going to show you a few more things around where they fit in your flow from an SSDLC perspective. So Center for Internet Security, you guys really need to start using CIS AWS benchmarks, and I'm just showing you 16 rules here, which are, again, compliance as code type rules that you can execute. It's all available to you. It's free, and there's about 44 rules that they have that you should be running. In a DevOps flow, okay, so you have the front end side and the back end side of DevOps. More on the back end side is where lots of compliance as code rules are run. Everything from cloud formation templates to CIS benchmark scans, looking at config drifts, firewall settings, automation, all of that is on your backend process. The front end is more of a static and dynamic analysis of your code, actual code. Okay, what some of these supporting services look like from compliance as code. So all these things are involved. These are some of them that we're listing. There's quite a few. There's actually quite a few, and Amazon keeps adding more and more products. So you have to keep writing more and more code all the time to test for these functions. So there's an automation like config and CloudFormation, or code in code pipeline. These are all products from AWS: code pipeline, build, deploy, star. And from a security perspective is audits like using the inspector product is a good product you should use. CloudWatch and Macy's for analyzing your disk for privacy data. Okay, so compliance as code is automated, continuous, and visible. And just a quick snapshot of where things fit in. It's very heavily goes in on the monitoring side. You see, okay, on the provisioning side. That's where it lives. I would say 80% of it. And then in the middle, there are a few things. For example, tag security artifacts. So you need to enforce tagging and create scripts around, is the tagging value correct and has it been set. Okay, continuous security and compliance value. I think you see it all now. It fits in. You have to leverage new cloud technologies, agile methods, and learn APIs to drive security and compliance as code. The value that it's always on and running, and you need to build a process where it's automated, it's continuous, and it's visible. Those are the three tenets of success that you need to look at. Do we have it automated? Is it always running? And is it visible? Okay, so is the monitoring. And visibility also means reporting. Visibility also means the analytics, reporting for compliance. So, in conclusion, what's next? Well, it's not enough to know top 10 or CIS controls, 150 controls, and you're good to go. And it's certainly not enough to write security procedures and policies and have them on your shelf or on your drive. All those things are great, but they're not enough. What you need to do is take all that and automate it, and that's the new norm, because that's the only thing that will help you drive enforcement and accountability in your organization. That's it. If somebody left a bucket on, you'll know about it right away, and you'll know who did it, and you can send them an email alert that please don't do that next time. And that's the traceability piece that's valuable. Okay, that kind of comes to a quick conclusion. So the next 3 minutes, we're going to get to our chat window, and you guys can ask fun questions. But prior to that, just a slight overview of our platform, Cloud Gnosis. What do we do? We basically create a capability where we can scan your infrastructure all the time, every hour on the hour, sometimes less, meaning every 30 minutes or more, and then be able to give you a view like this. So we're pulling in all the configuration information, all the metadata, and all the changes, and alerting you, where the risks are, in what region, and also we divide that by groups, risk areas. And you can have drill down, and you'll know the remediation steps. There are some steps you can auto remediate very quickly through automation we have pre-built, and then of course generate these evidence report for your compliance team and for the auditors. And that's what these reports look like. And these are some of the reports that we're showing you. We have other reports as well. Just a quick view of our compliance dashboard. There's just really showing you all the open vulnerabilities, the risk, and where things are failing. For example, there's 29 PCI compliance failures, and you can click on and see more. Okay, so with that, we're gonna open the Q&A session, and we can answer some questions for you.